shocking, but it also shouldn't be shocking, because this is exactly what we've been hearing, exactly what we've been seeing, frankly, exactly what we've known since January 6th, that Donald Trump and his enablers attempted to overthrow an election and stop our democratic process, period. Now, the fact that there's a PowerPoint and documents that have been circulated that they actually took this plan, this insurrection, this coup plan, and put it into a PowerPoint presentation, and we're trying to solicit support for it using these documents, surely is shocking. But this is a continued effort. This is not over. We're not talking about history here. This outlines a lot of the same things that Donald Trump and his supporters continue to try to do to undermine our democracy.
This is Representative Crow talking about the recent revelation about a PowerPoint presentation that was being spread around, talking about Donald Trump's plans to undermine our democratic system. And the key detail that's very important is both the amount of premeditation that went into this, the involvement of the people who have seen this in the January 6th insurrections, for which the investigation is still underway, and the simple fact that these tactics are still being used to this very day to try and undermine not only potentially future elections, but specifically the investigation into January 6th. Ultimately, we need to prepare for the reality that these Republicans have not given up on this idea of a coup, and many would be more than willing to try the same tactics again. Only if we don't do more to prepare, there's always the threat that they succeed, which is why this next bit is very important to understand.
And I wonder how you feel personally. I have some numbers. 12% of Capitol riot cases have military experience, 72 veterans, 2 National Guard, 4 Reserve, 1 active duty, 1 who was attending basic training. Should we be surprised? Are you surprised that so many military and ex-military were involved in that effort to overthrow our own country, our own democracy?
I am surprised, Nicole, and I feel awful about it, to be honest with you. As you might recall, I was one of those members who was trapped in the House gallery on January 6th for some time, surrounded by that riotous mob, by those insurrectionists. And I've struggled a lot over the past year almost, thinking about this idea that I was on one side of that door, and on the other side of that barricaded door were other veterans, people that took that same oath, that committed to protect the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And yet there they were, trying to overturn the election, trying to kill members of Congress, fellow veterans who had also taken that oath. How did we get here as a country?
Now, unfortunately, I think Representative Crow is taking too optimistic of a position here. You see, I was in the military for 8 years, and there's something that people really need to understand. The military really has its own internal culture, and that culture is very much one of following orders. People in the military are very much used to the idea of might makes right. That is the very lane that they're expected to operate in within a day-to-day basis. The notion of simple authority structures, following commands, and using violent force in order to enact specific goals is the very foundation of the military as an organization. Ultimately, that is what a military exists for. We need to understand from an internal cultural standpoint, militaries will always be primed for this sort of authoritarian coup. There's always going to be that potentiality, which is why in the Constitution, to be very clear, we aren't supposed to have a standing military. This is why the army has to be reauthorized once every 2 years. And there's a very good reason for that. Because when you allow people in the military to form their own culture, it creates this dangerous climate, especially when you consider that the top generals in the military have a lot of close working relationships with some of the richest people in the country, them being defense contractors and their executives. Those individuals are going to make a lot of money, whether or not we're going to war with other countries, or whether or not the military was going to war with the people of the United States. Some of these same military contractors provide a lot of equipment to local police departments, and you bet they really love selling those armored vehicles to police departments to roll through protesters. When you consider the profit motives of the private contractors and the command infrastructure of these military officers that have relationships with them, there's always that threat that right-wing elements would be willing to overthrow democratic processes, all for the gain of just a few handful of corporations. In fact, this was attempted once before in the history of the United States of America. They tried to perform a similar coup against Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That's right, apparently his New Deal was just too far to the left. So a bunch of business leaders went to a handful of military generals and told them that they would have top spots if they organized a coup against FDR. Now, luckily, one military general found out about it, didn't like it, reported it, and it never happened. But there's nothing really stopping big businesses from trying the same thing again, unless of course Congress decides to get its act together with this January 6th commission. And they need to actually be willing to look at the people who are involved, because the truth of the matter is, big businesses only care about whether or not they're making a profit. They couldn't care any less about democracy. Which brings us to this last point.
Of course, they do use folks like Michael Flynn and Mr. Waldron and others, people that have held positions of public trust in our military to try to advance those plans.
Well, and I think they use those people because those are people who traditionally in normal times have more credibility in our society. They connote responsibility and trust. But this time, the people they were targeting were other Americans. The target was the will of every American who hadn't voted for Donald Trump.
That's right. Right here, you see these top officials within the military that are being recruited by these people who have legitimacy within the military. You have some of these officers who have relationships with their former troops who are maybe now in higher positions. And this is very concerning, because if these people are allowed to walk around and keep calling their buddies in the military, then there's some real potential for some unsavory things happening right there, which is why we need to have a very thorough investigation, not only into all the people who were involved in January 6th, but also to their contacts, especially if they have any contacts in the military that might be sympathetic to their views. We can't have people sitting around in the military who are drooling over the idea of a fascist coup. And Joe Biden would be well within his rights to remove those people from their positions within the military. And once again, I know Representative Crow has this positive view of folks in the military, but the reality is, a lot of them were refusing to get the vaccine. And while that's not a perfect metric, the reality is that the people who are refusing vaccines and are anti-vax share a lot of overlap with the right-wingers who tried to stage a coup last year. Remember the people storming capitals around the country last year? A lot of them were anti-mask protesters. Those anti-mask protesters seem to be training for their final show, which was of course the January 6th coup attempt. I think we all need to understand that if a significant portion of people in the military are refusing to get vaccinated, that might be a good sign that some of them might also be inclined to supporting these types of coups. Which is why not only should there be this January 6th commission, but there also needs to be a lot of internal reviews of the military and personnel. I will tell you this, once again, I was in the military for 8 years. And I know a lot of enthusiastic Trump supporters, to say the very least, that were in the military. And the truth of the matter is, as much as many people would like to think that they're all upstanding citizens who want to do good in the world, I can tell you from personal experience that a lot of them take great joy in the suffering of others. And we should be very wary of thinking that everybody that's in the military is somehow going to be patriotic or have any type of loyalty to the idea of democracy. This is Ben Carollo with Rebel Headquarters. You can catch my show Galaxy Brain on the Young Turks Twitch channel every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. You can follow me on Twitter if you want to stay up to date with my content.